Amalia adjusted the delicate folds of her silken gown as the grand carriage rolled beneath the towering portico of Grosvenor House. The chill of an early autumn evening clung to the London air, but within, the atmosphere thrummed with the anticipation of the season's first grand ball. The faint glow of crystal chandeliers flickered through the great windows, promising an evening where the elite of the ton would gather, exchange veiled barbs beneath polite smiles, and parade the latest jewels and alliances. Amalia's heart, however, did not flutter with the prospect of gaiety. Instead, it beat with a cautious restraint, born not from timidity, but from keen awareness. Tonight was not merely a chance to shine. Her mother, Lady Cressida Montclair, sat stiffly beside her in the carriage, the sharp lines of her face softened only by the pearl-white gloves clutched tightly in her lap. Her dark eyes darted restlessly toward the crowded arrival below, already acknowledging the small whispered clusters that hinted at gossip, scandal, and disparagement. It was a season long prophesied by society's unseen currents to be particularly difficult for the Montclair family, and no wonder. Amalia looked out briefly, catching sight of her younger sister Beatrice, already flitting through the grand hall like a golden butterfly, her pale blonde hair catching the chandelier's light, the promise of innocence and youth peeking from every smile. But the faint glimmer on Beatrice's slender finger, the engagement ring, Amalia's engagement ring, caught a different, sharper light. It was a jewel meant for her, a symbol pledged, now paraded with a brazen audacity that left a cold coil tightening in her chest. The ring was unmistakable, a band of gold with a single large aquamarine stone, set with a delicate filigree that bespoke refinement and history. It had been reserved by Edmund Harcourt, the man with the scar just above his right eyebrow, a man whose own return from the bloody fields of war was whispered to have left him changed, shadowed by depth few dared to understand. Edmund stood at the far end of the ballroom, just out of direct reach of the same chatter that hushed beneath gilded fans and fluttering gowns. His tall frame cut a striking silhouette against the draped crimson and ivory curtains. His dark brown hair, swept back with a hint of natural wave, framed a face marked with quiet intensity and something almost like weariness. Those deep hazel eyes flickered toward Amalia with a guarded curiosity that suggested he saw more than politeness allowed. There was something magnetic about the way he carried himself, a gravitas born of suffering and survival. Amalia felt his gaze and held it without flinching. She softened her posture, the barest trace of a smile brushing her lips, as a shield against the murmurs that swirled about her like a gathering storm. Her grey-green eyes, sharp and observant, missed no detail. From the glittering pearls at the throat of a duchess to the stiff unease in Lady Cressida's countenance, everything was a tapestry of intent and consequence. "I hope you are well, mother," Amalia said quietly, inclining her head toward Lady Cressida. Her mother's eyes flicked away, a barely perceptible tightening of her lips the only reply. "The ton is less forgiving than I feared, Amalia. Your sister's indiscretion has not gone unnoticed. Indiscretion." The word was both poison and promise. As it lingered in the air between them, Amalia's gaze shifted back to Beatrice, who smiled too widely and laughed too brightly. Each glance from the bystanders, each lowered voice, carried the weight of whispered accusations. The moment the engagement ring embraced Beatrice's finger, those whispers blossomed into heated speculation. Whispers that spoke of betrayal and scandal, of impulsive youth usurping rightful promise, and Amalia had to endure it all. The quiet strength upon which her poised frame rested was becoming a mask only she knew how to wear. The very foundation of her anticipated future was being quietly dismantled under the chandelier's glittering gaze. Her thoughts flickered momentarily to Edmund once more. There was something dangerous about the man's presence, something that suggested he was privy to secrets he hadn't yet revealed. The scar on his brow, the shadows beneath his eyes, the way his jaw clenched ever so slightly as he regarded the scene. It spoke of battles fought off the public stage, battles perhaps harsher even than those witnessed in the drawing-rooms and ballrooms of London. Yet beneath that weighty exterior was the unmistakable spark of interest directed squarely at her, and, for the first time in many weeks, Amalia allowed herself a measure of guarded hope. This was not a night for easy happiness. It was a night that would ripple through the season, casting long shadows and further complicating the web of alliances and animosities within the Montclair family. The morning sun filtered soft and clear through the tall sash windows of her close friend Marianne's London townhouse, bathing the ornately carved mahogany furniture in a sheen of polished gold. The quiet murmur of voices and the clink of porcelain filled the spacious morning room as women of the ton received their calls, each lady dressed with an air of studied grace. Cool spring blooms filled crystal vases, their scent mingling with the faint aroma of Earl Grey tea and freshly baked buns. Amalia sat near the fireplace, the warmth seeping into her slender fingers. As she fingered the edge of her embroidered shawl, her mind was a tempest swirling with the images and conversations from the night before. The stolen engagement ring, the whispered insinuations, the reckless flaunting by a sister she both loved and mistrusted. These burdens weighed heavily upon her. Beatrice's youthful laughter from across the room grated sharply on her nerves. The younger sister was in high spirits today, glowing with an innocence and charm the world seemed eager to envelop, and for Amalia that innocence was a cruel mask, concealing the selfishness and ambition concealed beneath. The moment Marianne excused herself momentarily, Amalia seized it. She crossed the polished floor almost silently and stopped beside Beatrice, her voice low and deliberate. "Beatrice, we must speak." Beatrice blinked up at her, eyes wide and clear, but shadowed with an unmistakable edge of calculation Amalia had not noticed before. "What is it?" Amalia's fingers twitched, betraying the tension she otherwise kept carefully hidden. "The ring, the engagement ring." "It does not belong on your hand." Beatrice's smile faltered just for a heartbeat before she recovered with unsettling finesse. "You ought to know better than to be so dramatic. It is merely a trinket. Besides, it suits me far better at the moment." "Suiting you is not the question. The engagement was meant for me, with Edmund Harcourt. You would do me a kindness not to turn our family's name into a scandal." Beatrice's bright blue eyes narrowed slightly, a faint dimple appearing as she tilted her head and toyed with a loose ringlet. "Scandal? My dear Amalia, in this world the only scandal is to be forgotten. If seizing such an opportunity means bending the rules slightly, then consider it a lesson in survival." Amalia's heart pounded with a mixture of anger and despair. "You have no right." "I have every right the world grants me," Beatrice interrupted smoothly, "especially if you prefer to remain silent. Some might even call it protection in this fragile society of ours. But do be cautious with your threats. They can be dangerous." The veiled menace in Beatrice's tone sent a chill through Amalia. She opened her mouth to reply, but found her words snatched away by the sudden arrival of Edmund Harcourt, who entered the room with a quiet confidence born of both privilege and hardship. His eyes, those deep hazel wells, immediately found Amalia's, and for a fleeting moment it felt as though the muted bustle of the room dissolved, and only the two of them existed within the gentle glow of morning light. "May I intrude?" Edmund's voice was low, yet carried an unmistakable warmth beneath the careful reserve. Beatrice stiffened for a moment before recovering with a bland smile. "Sir Edmund, what an unexpected pleasure!" Amalia's own surprise was tempered by a swift retrieval of composure. She inclined her head respectfully, but her heart drummed unevenly beneath her blouse. Edmund was a man, knottily woven, with layers of experience and guarded secrets that none but a few privileged souls glimpsed. His presence here was no accident, and the unspoken understanding between them was both terrifying and exhilarating. "I heard there was conversation better left unspoken," he said quietly, stepping closer with the ease of a man accustomed to battlefields both military and social. "If there is any counsel you seek, Amalia, then you have but to ask." Amalia swallowed, heart caught between hope and wariness. She knew the tangled politics of the ton and the fragile alliances that governed every social gesture. In Edmund's offer lay both promise and peril. "I thank you," she answered softly, "but the matters at hand involve more than just me." Edmund's gaze shifted toward Beatrice briefly, the glimmer in his eyes sharpening into something unreadable. Then, perhaps it would be prudent to choose one's allies carefully. The room seemed to contract around them, the familiar murmurs of morning calls fading to a quiet hum. Neither Amalia nor Edmund made a move to sever the tenuous thread now drawn between them. Yet beneath the surface, new complications stirred, feelings unspoken, loyalties uncertain, and a promise of aid that would entangle them both in the season's relentless dance of desire and deception. As Edmund fell into step beside her, his presence, a sturdy support she had not expected to find so soon, Amalia understood that the coming weeks would test her in every imaginable way. Family betrayal, society's cold glances, and the slowly rising tide of a complicated, slow-burning romance would pull her into a world far more dangerous and demanding than the one from which she had tried to hide. In this moment of quiet confrontation and new alliance, the season had already begun to turn, and with it, Amalia's fate. The scandal of the season was never slow to travel, but this particular firestorm sparked with alarming speed and veracity through the gilded halls of Almack's. Whispered fragments, exchanged behind gloved fans and clinking cups, coalesced into a damning narrative. The engagement ring intended for Amalia had been claimed by her younger, golden-haired sister. The insinuations were poisonous, an act so brazen it invited suspicion not just of Beatrice's innocence, but of their entire family's reputation. Amalia felt the weight of the murmurs as heavily as the chandeliers overhead. It was as though every gaze was a needle, every casual remark a blade. She moved through the rooms like a ghost caught in a whirlwind of pointed looks and half-smiles, each one a reminder that the season could be as cruel as it was dazzling. At breakfast the next morning, her mother's voice cut sharply through the clatter of silver and china. Lady Westbridge's complexion was a pale flame, her usual composure brittle, her tone insistent. "Amalia," she said, eyes fixed on her daughter with a cold steel beneath the honey, "this charade must end." With the whispers growing louder, "You cannot afford hesitation." Amalia looked up from the cup of tea she barely touched. The scent of bergamot mingled with the unyielding pressure in the room. "Mother," she began softly, "I do not believe that accepting any proposal born of convenience, even the Viscount's, will extinguish these fires. It may feed them instead." "No," Lady Westbridge's voice was sharper now, barely containing the panic beneath her polished veneer. "Viscount Merton is well connected, his family influential. Even if he is less than remarkable in mind or manners, his name will shelter us from disgrace. You must see the necessity of it." Amalia's fingers tightened around her teacup, the porcelain seeming an anchor amid the storm. She knew the Viscount's name. Lord Merton was the sort the ton spoke of as pleasant but bland good looks, empty charm, a reputation for dullness, kind enough to be dismissed. Yet Lady Westbridge's urgings came not from affection, but a calculation of social survival, an expedient alliance offered as sanctuary from the public barrage. "He's insipid," Amalia said, not ashamed of the bluntness. "I seek more than safety, mother. I seek respect my own and my family's." She would not let her life be a series of quiet compromises. Not here, not now. Their conversation was cut short when Edmund appeared in the morning room, his presence like a shadow filling the light. The tension between mother and daughter thickened visibly. Edmund's gaze passed over Lady Westbridge with a cool, restrained politeness, but when it settled on Amalia, it softened, the quiet understanding threading between them, unmistakable. Lady Westbridge quickly seized the moment, presenting the matter as if to preempt further hesitation. "Lord Edmund," she began, "I am sure you would agree, the situation demands decisive action." "The Viscount's intentions toward Amalia are honourable." Edmund's eyes darkened slightly, the weariness there edged with something fiercer. "Is it honour or convenience, Lady Westbridge? I do not believe a match should be forged merely to shield from scandal." Her mother's smile tightened, a blade disguised as civility. "Prudence, Lord Edmund, is the handmaiden of honour. You, of all people, ought to understand that better than most." The veiled challenge hung in the air, but Edmund did not retreat. Instead, his gaze flicked to Amalia's, seeking permission, or perhaps an unspoken pat. She met his eyes steadily, the cautious flicker of hope igniting anew. A few days later, the social tide at Almack's reached a simmering boil. Edmund found Amalia in the gallery, where the light spilled in long shafts across the polished floorboards, and the soft murmur of conversation floated beyond the heavy curtains. Lord Merton was present, his bland smile never quite meeting the sharp glint of Amalia's eyes, and the clash that followed was inevitability embroidered in every polite glance and restrained word. Edmund said quietly, but with a sharpness that cut through the ritual of social niceties. Amalia's glance flicked toward Merton, who stiffened imperceptibly, the innocence in his blue eyes faltering under Edmund's gaze. "I am weighing what is best for my family," she replied carefully. Edmund's voice lowered, the impulse rising beyond caution. "Is it best for your heart, or just for your convenience?" Lord Merton's composure cracked, a flicker of irritation crossing his features as he stepped forward. "I assure you, Lord Edmund, my courtship is sincere and respectable. It would do well if you reserved judgment." His tone was clipped and condescending, the first crack in his polished exterior revealing a brittle core. Edmund's dark eyes flashed with something far more dangerous, a raw impatience mixed with a protective instinct too fierce to contain. "Respectable," he echoed bitterly. "I have watched your kind reduce women to ornaments and pawns. If that is your measure of honour, I lose no time in renouncing it." Words hung thick in the air, like heavy velvet, the tension so taut it might snap. Amalia felt her pulse hammer, the unguarded passion in Edmund's voice, striking chords she dared not name. Beatrice's laughter rang faintly from a distant room, a cruel contrast to the storm mounting here. Lady Westbridge's intervention was swift, her voice sharp as a whip crack. "Enough. Lord Edmund, your temper ill becomes you, and endangers the very propriety you claim to defend." Edmund's jaw tightened, the small scar above his eyebrow catching the light in a grimace. Another moment, and he might have spoken further, but his gaze slid to Amalia, who shook her head minutely, the silent plea urging restraint. The scene dissolved as quickly as it had ignited. Lord Merton withdrew, and Edmund's breaths came heavy, the impulsiveness a shadowed crack in his otherwise measured facade. Later that evening, as the manor settled under the velveteen shroud of night, Amalia found herself wandering among the shelves of the family library. The timbers creaked in low conversation with the wind, papers scattered like secrets awaiting discovery. Her fingers brushed past old leather-bound volumes until something, a bundle hidden behind a large ottoman, caught her attention. Unfolding the yellowed letters with care, she found handwriting curling across the brittle pages, a voice from the past speaking in ink and folded paper. The correspondence was between her mother and an unknown recipient, the elegant script betraying a tone less than innocent. As she read, a chill settled deep within her, a revelation that tore at the carefully constructed narrative she had believed. Her mother's hand was not merely involved in high society salons and soirees, but had woven herself into the very feud that had strained her relationship with Edmund's family, a feud older than the current season's troubles, stained with pride, jealousy, and betrayal. The letters spoke plainly of deliberate actions, secret arrangements, and a calculated attempt to undermine their rivals. Lady Westbridge's machinations were laid bare, a history of family politics that had begotten the cold distance and quiet animosity now embraced by all parties. Amalia's heart pounded. Each word forging chains she had never known bound her own life. Yet within, the ache was a spark, fierce resolve to confront the past, not to shrink from it as she had once thought best. The weight of knowledge was heavy, but it was a mantle she would bear. She held the last letter close, the ink faded, but the consequences vivid. If she were to navigate the treacherous currents ahead, it would be with open eyes and steady heart, for only through facing the truths, long buried, could she hope to carve a path toward trust, toward love, with Edmund or with herself. Her hand lingered on the musty paper, the shimmer of morning light filtering through the window, hinting at a dawn not just of day, but of new beginnings. The drawing-room was thick with the scent of polished mahogany and simmering candle wax, a muted glow casting delicate shadows that danced across the glittering silverware and stiff, starched linen. The long dinner table between Amalia and Edmund was a battlefield laid with fine china and fluted glasses, a precarious truce maintained by the careful choreography of polite conversation. Yet beneath the veneer of civility, the air pulsed with a tension as palpable as the clinking of cutlery. Amalia sat with her spine impeccably straight, the soft folds of her pale blue gown whispering against the chair's carved arm. Her grey-green eyes were steady, a quiet storm behind them, as she met Edmund's deep hazel gaze across the table. His jaw was set, his broad shoulders slightly angled toward her, as if barring himself against the day's unseen winds. The scar above his right eyebrow caught the flicker of candlelight, a reminder silent and unyielding of battles both literal and figurative. So, it seems the Westbridge-Winthrop feud is a thread that refuses to unravel, much like the muslin on these unsolvable season gowns, Edmund remarked, voice smooth, edges sharpened with wry amusement. Amalia's lips curved in a tight, unmoving line. Unravel? Yes, but perhaps it is not the thread to blame, but those who tug at it recklessly, without regard for what will come undone. She lifted her glass of claret delicately, eyes never wavering. I wonder, though, how much longer we are all condemned to dance on this frayed fabric before it bears us entirely. Edmund's eyes darkened with something complicated. Regret, frustration, maybe a reluctant admiration. You speak as if you have seen the whole tapestry, Amalia. Yet all I see are fragments stitched with suspicion and old grudges. Do you believe reconciliation is possible? Her gaze faltered only briefly. "I believe it could be, but only if truth is laid bare, and forgiveness proves not to be a weapon wielded for convenience." Her voice dropped to a quieter, firmer tone. "Our families have been prisoners of pride long before I was born." She glanced at him fully then. "Perhaps only we can unlock these chains." A flicker of something hope, fleeting and fragile, passed between them before the intrusions of the evening's other guests intruded, fragmenting the moment. Beatrice, glowing like sunlight captured in silk, sat nearby with a radiance that strained to brighten the dim atmosphere. Her golden hair was swept into an impossibly high chignon, soft ringlets falling like a golden cascade around her face, her bright blue eyes wide and shining with youthful delight. Yet, beneath her angelic exterior, a dangerous game was unfolding. She was laughing, a clear tinkling sound, as she leaned toward young Lord Ashcombe, a handsome and vain nobleman, known for his charm and roving attentions. Their whispered exchanges, peppered with coquettish glances and gentle touches to his arm, rippled through the room like currents beneath still waters. Amalia's chest tightened, watching the scene unfold. The youngest sister's flirtations were a threat not merely to her family's fragile dignity, but to the delicate web of alliances and reputations carefully maintained by whispered promises and threatened sanctions. Lady Westbridge's shadowy manipulations felt less distant in that moment, as if bewitchments had reached beyond the mother to the girls under her roof. Still, Amalia's mask settled into place, crafted from steel and silk. She lifted her glass and sipped deliberately, tasting the bitterness of the wine mingled with the bitter knot inside her. To anyone watching, her composure seemed unshakable, a model of calm refinement, but beneath, a storm-raged fear for her sister's reckless abandon, sorrow for the family's unravelling, and a desperate hope that the tide might yet turn. Edmund's eyes flicked in Beatrice's direction, no doubt registering the undercurrents Amalia tried so intently to ignore. His expression darkened ever so slightly, reluctant or perhaps protective, but he said nothing. After a moment, his gaze returned to Amalia, and his voice softened, bearing the weight of unspoken fears. "She grows like the springtime, bright and unpredictable, but it is a delicate season. One misstep, and the blossoms wither." There was vulnerability beneath his words. A man weary of seasons wrought with peril. "I have no desire for scandal to soil what little peace we might build." Amalia met his gaze squarely, courage lifting her voice. "But peace is not granted. It is forged, often through sacrifice and silence." The dinner proceeded, courses gliding by with punctuated restraint, the room alive with the clink of silver and murmurs of alliances shifting beneath polite smiles. Amalia caught herself stealing glances at Edmund, noting the subtle tightening of his hands as he listened to the polite but pointed inquiries from others about his family's affairs. Beneath his weariness, a quiet strength anchored him to this moment, the moment she hoped might mark a turning point. Days folded into the next of London's endless, glittering events, a masked assembly at Lady Harcourt's grand townhouse, the air thick with perfumes, whispered secrets, and the rustle of silk. The chandelier's crystal prisms fractured the light into shifting jewels that danced with every subtle movement, like promises and betrayals flickering in the hearts of those gathered. Amalia moved with the grace expected of her, the faint scent of lavender trailing as she passed, fingers just brushing the delicate lace on her sleeve. Though the room was alive with conversation laughter shared between old friends, the sharp exchange of acquaintance and gossiper, mind was elsewhere, tethered to a single gnawing truth. Edmund was near, among a group of gentlemen whose smiles bore the veneer of disinterest, but whose eyes held a predatory gleam. She saw the subtle shift, the tightening of Edmund's jaw, the stiffening of his posture, And then, quietly, the approach of Lady Mantford, a woman whose preserved youth and sharp tongue had for years been the source of whispered scandal. Amalia's breath caught with a silent unease. Lady Mantford's voice, though dipped in honey, carried a venomous undertone. "Dear Edmund, one hears such intriguing tales these days. Pity how unfortunate circumstances can so greatly tarnish a family's name." Her glance flicked knowingly towards Amalia, with a smile that promised ruin disguised as civility. "One must always consider the company one keeps, must we not?" Eyes across the room began to twinkle with the spark of curiosity. Whispers leaped like rivulets through the crowd. Amalia felt the steady pull of the tide, threatening to engulf everything delicate and hard-won between them. She could have joined the murmurs, shared suspicion, invited the scent of scandal to fester and bloom, yet within her a steadiness blossomed, born of the revelations she had uncovered, the truths she had vowed to face. Instead, she moved to Edmund's side with quiet determination. "My lord, your loyalty to truth deserves an audience far larger than this," she said softly, her voice a calm anchor in the sea of swirling doubt. "Trust, once given, is not so casually undone by rumour and insinuation." Edmund's eyes met hers, gratitude flickering in their depth. Softened by surprise at her solidarity, somewhere beneath the exhaustion there was relief, a space where scandal's shadow could not reach, fortified by discretion. She inclined her head politely toward Lady Mantford, whose smile tightened imperceptibly, but did not waver. "Let us not forget the power of silence," Amalia continued, low enough that only a handful might hear. "Some truths are worth protecting, and some reputations safeguarded by restraint." The crowd's curious gazes multiplied, but the tide was momentarily stilled. Whispers still spun and twirled, but the more malicious questions found no fertile ground, at least not this evening. Edmund's voice was a rough whisper near her ear when the gathering began to shift. "You were wise beyond measure tonight," he murmured, the gratitude raw and unguarded. "In a world so quick to judge, your discretion is a rare treasured gift." Amalia met his look, steady and resolute, the weight of both their pasts and uncertain futures threading between them. "Trust is earned, Edmund," she said, "and sometimes preserved not in words, but in silence." The ballroom's music swelled again, a waltz spiraling upwards into the night air, carrying laughter, promises, and the scent of unfinished stories. But beneath the glittering chandeliers and whispered scandals, within the guarded pauses and fears, Amalia found a seed of hope taking root, a hope that perhaps through patience and quiet strength, the threads of their fractured lives might one day be woven. As she stood there, poised between the shadows and the light, Amalia felt the fragile beginnings of a dawn, not merely of the season's end, but of a destiny claimed on her own terms. The moon cast a cool silver glow through the tall, mullioned windows of the estate library, pooling across the rich walnut shelves, heavy with leather-bound volumes and scattered manuscripts. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and the faintest trace of burning tallow from a single flickering candle set near the heavy carved desk. Outside, the distant hum of the evening's quiet echoed in the shadows as the great house finally settled into that rare stillness between midnight and dawn. Amalia sat in the deep wing-back chair, fingers folded demurely in her lap, her gaze steady but softened by the vulnerability the night invited. Edmund, standing by the window with his back turned to the room, seemed a figure carved from the charcoal darkness, shadows clinging to the strong lines of his face. After a long silence, he took a slow breath and turned toward her, as if conceding some unspoken battle within. "There are secrets I have long held," his voice was low, the timbre roughened by years of burden. "Not the kind that create scandal, but those that weigh down the heart like stones. I do not wear my scars as openly as some, least of all you, and perhaps that was foolish. His eyes, those deep hazel pools edged with weariness, searched hers for a flicker of understanding. In truth, I had feared the very night that has brought us here. Amalia's expression softened. Fear is a most honest companion, Edmund. We all bear it, though many wear masks so tightly that even their shadows seem untouched.